So, let's see. So I'm John Nyman. I've been doing .NET full stack development for just under 3 years now. I've been doing VBA before that with .NET and Excel add-ins before that, and I've been doing F# for about maybe 7 years, and C# also. But this talks about SQL Server. So uh, at my last job, I'm currently unemployed, so if anyone knows about positions, I'm open to hear anything about them. But at my last position, I had the opportunity to create a new database from reporting access databases over to SQL Server. And so I had the opportunity to um, uh, do a lot of refactoring as we were figuring out exactly how we wanted the model to look, and learned SQL Server data tools along the way, and found it to be an immensely useful tool, especially if you're doing a lot of design and changing of your database. And even when it's in production, it's really nice because you know what your database has looked like, what changes have been made, and makes it much easier to work with. Speaking of resumes, okay, so if you're like me, sometimes your development cycle is pretty much you have your production database, you have your development machine, you might write to it, it might go through a DBA if you're lucky, or yeah, well, sometimes it's not so lucky. Sometimes you want to just go straight there, but there's not a whole lot of, there's no source control, there's no anything. Maybe you have some flat files for source control, but there's pretty much, it's pretty willy-nilly compared to what your regular application code looks like, right? Going through source control and continuous integration and such. So ideally, this is how our database source control would look. It would look something like this. You'd have your source control, you'd have your continuous integration that would do your testing, and then you'd have your continuous deployment. And with SQL Server data tools, we could get closer to this goal. And in fact, I think you can get to that goal altogether. Today, we're just going to talk about that first part on the top where we're doing the source control and keeping everything good and how to work with SQL Server data tools. So what does it give you? So let's see. Excellent. There we go. So when you create a database project in your solution, you could develop, build, and test and publish all within that SQL Server database. So it gives you great editing capabilities. So it gives you IntelliSense, gives you error highlighting, so you could identify the schema errors, syntax errors. You could find different pieces of code in your project. Go-to definition, just like a regular project. You could create or modify your tables, columns, rename columns with confidence. It'll generate the code for you. So after you make these changes, it'll generate the code for you that you need to make against maybe your staging database or your production database. Which I think is huge because it's easy to skip steps and things. You can edit directly in Visual Studio. I've never actually done that, and we're not going to go over that today. Um, but you could do filtering on it and then edit your data. Um, you get live database debugging, which I've never done in Visual Studio, and we're not going over today either. So, and then you could, like your routines and such, you could edit your routines, like stored procedures and functions. Um, so you could, so this is kind of what I was talking about before, how you've made your changes in Visual Studio, and you so now your code, your source is different than maybe your staging database. And so then you could do a compare, it'll generate a script, or you could have it published directly to it, and it'll change it on the fly for you. Um, and and then, you know, if everything looks good there, then you can go ahead and do it on production. So yeah, if you're doing it all in your uh, in Visual Studio, hopefully none of this will happen because you know, even as you're making changes to your database, you know, you might make a mistake and then, you know, delete some data that you didn't want to. And there's, when it does generate scripts, it will check if there's data. And if there's data in a column, like you renamed it, but you improperly renamed it, then it'll check for you and say, hey, I'm not going to do this because um, there's data there and I don't want to lose the data. So where did I find what? Um, this it is an XKCD cartoon. The link is in the notes of the so. Um, and eventually it could bring you continuous integration and deployment as you get used to working with it more. Eventually, you could have that ideal. There are some things to watch out for, and we'll go into some of those as we go through the presentation. And ideally, you'll be able to make changes more quickly because you'll be confident in your changes with with this tooling. Let's get to work. But before we get to work, let's see what we're going to be working on. So, um, so this is kind of your standard setup. You do not have to follow this setup. This is just one of the changes they made from the previous what they built SQL Server Data Tools off of. I believe it was similar to having folders like this. So you'd have your project, a folder for each schema that you have in your database, um, and then your scripts and your security, which would be like schema definitions and login user. Um, and then maybe if you're doing in-memory tables, you'd have your storage there. And so under each schema, you might have functions, stored procedures, tables, views, user type, user defined types and such. And I'm sure there's stuff that I have missed up there. And these slides are available. If you go to the page for this presentation, the link to the slides are there. So let's whoops. And you saw that there's a executed you could execute pre-deployment and post-deployment scripts. And those are just raw SQL, so you could write whatever you want in them. They, but there is a certain order of operation to it. So it'll do the schema compares against whatever database you're publishing it to. It'll generate the script, and it'll execute the script. And of course, you could execute the script yourself, or you could have it automatically execute the script. But before it executes the script, it does the pre-deployment, and then executes the script, and then does the post-deployment. Okay. And here's those links at the end of the presentation. But yeah, let's get into some code. Everyone can see that? Let's get rid of this guy. And I just got to get to my notes there. There we go. So, oh, yes. Sorry, guys. I'm giving 4 presentations today. I'm kind of getting some of them mixed up here. So, yeah, I was going to actually do one from scratch so you could see it from the very beginning. So we'll actually keep this one. So if I forget something, oops. So if I forget something, I can go back to this one and figure out what I'm doing. Here we go. So if you just go and open up Visual Studio, you do a new project. In the templates, you'll find a SQL Server one. You might need to install Visual Studio Data Tools first to get that template and all the tooling that's involved in that. So then you have the SQL Server Data Project. And we'll just do it in this top level one. We'll call it SSDT. I'll start it up for you. Okay, so it just kind of gives you a simple project there. And what, let's see. What we're going to do is we have a database already set up. So what we're going to do is we're just going to go to let's see. So, oh, there it is. No wonder why I'm having issues. So yeah, so it's import. I was like, yeah, I'm a little confused. Where is it? So you could import from a data tier application. That's the top one that it says. And then a database or a script. And we're going to do it from a database. So we'll select a connection. So it doesn't, need to be on your own machine, but we're going to do Sequela database. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but it's in the notes if you want to look at it. It's just a simple database. That's why I picked it. Then you have these settings, and you could do the folder structure, which will be similar to how I was showing you. And you could import everything. Okay, we'll just do those. It goes through all your tables, your routines, and everything, and you could do your logins. I opted not to do the login. Um, I am not entirely sure about that. I know you could create a subset of like a solution or a project. You could create a subset of your tables. Um, but I'm not sure if you could actually do a easy import that way. Okay, there we go. So it finished bringing everything in, so you can see it has the schema DBO. You can see the tables for all the different films, a couple of stored procedures. Oh yeah, I brought in my user, which we're gonna do later. Whoops, I didn't delete it from the master before class. So okay, um, so everything is declarative. You don't have to worry about um, make or alter or anything like. You don't have to worry about like alter or dropping tables or anything. It's just create the table. And let's see. Oh, yeah, that's why. Okay. So you could say, here's the actor table. All it is create table. And it'll, when you do the comparisons and it generates a script, it'll do the alter table for you. So you can make changes down here if you prefer writing it in the SQL directly, or you could, it has this nice GUI and it gives you all the list of different types it could be, allow null and everything. Um, so let's see. So let's go ahead and create that user. So right here, we'll create a login, and it'll give you an amazing list of different objects you could actually use. So we want to create a login, so L, we'll call it my awesome login. Check this out. Not only does it give you a login, gives it your own unique little password there too. Yes. So, and what good is a login without a user? So we'll create a user, item, user. There we go. There we go. And so it creates everything there for us, and we could change that to a login with login. Right, and we got the syntax wrong there, right? It should. Um, okay. No, it shouldn't. So, but I mean, you get the point. Unfortunately, it doesn't give you syntax, IntelliSense to say, okay, well, this goes after that. That's my biggest gripe about SQL. That it doesn't help you along because every time it's a little different. So, but if I could remember how to make a login, a user with a login, basically you just do that, and you wouldn't have to build. It'd be like writing C# where it just kind of tells on the fly what the types are supposed to be. Okay, and then you can see here. Okay. So yeah, so you can see there it's giving me an issues because I don't have it connected to the login. Oops, that's C#. Okay. So okay, so let's go ahead and go back to the table. And so our actor table. And so we talked about how you could edit directly here. So let's say you want date time offset, you could change it right there. Or you could say you want, I'm really good at my SQL, so I could just do it myself. Like that. Maybe I want it to be daytime offset 2. Oh, daytime offset 2, what's going on? Oh, it's not, yeah, it's not a type, so it's telling me, right? So it's saying there's no such thing. So I can say, oh, okay, I guess my SQL skills aren't as awesome as I thought they were. And then let's say, well, I don't, last update, I want it to say last update offset. There we go, we changed it. And then let's go ahead and compare it to our table. So we could go here, and if you wanted to publish directly, you could do that. Or we could do, well, yeah, let's go ahead and do publish. Oh, can't build. Oh no. And it looks like unresolved interdependencies. The error list. Oh, so I had an error. I changed the name of this, right? That's the update offset. So that's pretty snazzy, huh? It just tells me when I've had a stored procedure that was incorrect. Let's try that again. Go ahead and publish. Connect to the database, SQL. Yeah, it all looks good. We could publish directly or we could generate. Let's just go ahead and generate the script. Okay, that green check mark means everything went well. So we'll view the script. Let's see. Okay, everything looks good. And so it does all this kind of setup there. Let's see. Oh. And then here it's saying it's gonna drop some stuff. Let's see. It's gonna drop the user because I had created those users before. So, and then I changed it so it doesn't rely on the login, right? So then I'm gonna drop this column, but wait a minute. I didn't want to drop that column, right? I just wanted to change the name, right? So I'm gonna lose all that data. So let's see. So you gotta be a little careful when you're doing stuff like this. Sometimes it'll catch it. I think if it does a drop table, it'll actually stop it and throw an error. But it's looking like there is no just for the column. It's not gonna say, hey, there was data there, and so we can't drop it. So let's see. Yeah. So okay. So yeah, if I'm doing any destructive, anything destructive is going to raise an error. So that'll actually stop it from working if I actually published. So let's see. Here we go. We'll go back to actor. And we didn't want to make that change, right? Then we'll go back to that stored procedure and go ahead and fix that. Of course, we could have just gone to our errors and it would have shown it, right? So if we're going to do it right, so if I do the change up here, it'll do a rename for me, right? And then it won't actually delete all that data we have. Or I could do it right here and do a refactor and rename. So either way it'll do the same thing. So last update offset. And then it'll go through here and say, hey, we got changes for you in this table. And would you want to do it in there? Let's see. It should say it for the stored procedure also. Does that? Okay, so yeah, so it's saying, okay, we're gonna do it in here, and then it's also referenced in here. Okay, there we go. I just need to select it. So I'll make that change there and in there for you. That's pretty nice. It does all that work for me, so I don't have to go back and forth. And then we'll go ahead and go back. And then if you look in this refactor log that it made for us, kind of gives a nice little declarative way to see what we're making changes of. So we've had last update, and it's the rename refactor, and we're going to rename it to this new name right there. So we can get kind of some nice little insight. So let's see. And this time, instead of doing a publish, let's go ahead and do a schema compare. We're going to start with our project. Oops, nope. I'm going to go to our project. Select the target. Tequila. And we'll compare the two. Thinking. Thinking really hard. Got that fan going. Okay, so then everything's green, so that means it did a good comparison. So if you select on here, let's see. So this is a table. It'll give us a side-by-side look to see what we're changing. It's like, oh, doing this procedure too. So what am I doing different? Oh, okay. Yeah, that makes sense. And then before it was create user for. Oh, that's how you do it with a for. So that's where I was messing up, huh? So this time we're going to get rid of that. We're going to say we don't want to rely on that login. And we could say go ahead and update it. Yeah, do it. And then we could look at the results or the script. Let's see what the script did this time. So last time it was dropping that column, right? Let's see. So it altered the column there. Oh, so that's the date time. So where did it actually take care of that? So it dropped the user to make the user without the login. Altered the column. So it must have created that column somewhere, right? So let me go ahead and do a little search for that. So it did a stored procedure SP rename. Like I didn't even know there was a SP underscore rename stored procedure. So that's great. Didn't even have to like know about it. Cool. Yeah, so you could, when you're first getting used to this, you might want to go through the scripts first to make sure you're not doing anything dumb, you know, accidentally dropping a table or anything like that. And yeah, and so did it even do that check this time to do the raise error? Raise error. No, it didn't even do it because it wasn't doing anything destructive. Oh. Yeah, sorry, it's Vim. Yeah, so no raise. Okay. Yeah, so since it didn't do anything destructive, it knew not to even look for it. So yeah, so last time it would have caught my mistake of renaming without doing an actual rename properly. So yeah, it's pretty smart. It does a lot of the thinking for you. Not that you have to give up. Not that you'll give up thinking altogether, but let's see. Um, so let's go ahead and look a little deeper into this. Whoa. Okay, there we go. So here's our project. So if we go into our bin, debug, you can see so that DACPack, so that's your database right there. So it puts everything into there. If you had another solution with another database, and let's say this database was making a call over the line to that other database, you can use this DACPack to reference it in your other SSDT project, right? And then the DDL. So if you have any CLR functions in there, that's what the DDL would be. And then there's your publish file that we did before. So yeah, so everything's just right there for you. Let's see. Okay. Also, I forgot to show this other part to you. So in this publish, where's my mouse? There it is. Okay. So in the publish, you're also doing you're doing like refresh right there and everything. Because I don't know about you, but if I make a change, I might forget that you're supposed to go through and refresh any routine that's actually using that. So that's pretty nice. Yeah, this is a view that it's refreshing. So, okay. And we could also go the other way. So here we've been making changes directly in Visual Studio, but if you're like me, you'll enjoy working with SQL Server Data or SQL Server Management Studio, right? It's pretty nice. So this project, Visual SSDT, is not meant to actually replace SQL Server Management Studio. It's meant to yeah, it's meant to have all your code in there to so you could um, uh, store so you have all your database in a declarative form right there for you to work with, right? But sometimes you just want to hit your database, write scripts that will hit there, experiment, um, and kind of have that interaction with the database. Oops. There we go. So let's see, database. Um, so let's see. So here we might, we just want to play around just like normal. But we could say, okay, I want to make a create a procedure or something, right? Yes. Select yes. So you could create your procedure in there, run it, ran successfully. You go back here and you can say, okay, I made some changes directly in my database that I'm working on. Let's go ahead and go from there and compare it. Let's see. So we're adding this procedure. Let's go ahead and update. Yes. And then let's see, my store procedures. Yeah, there it is. So it has that two-way ability to go back and forth. So that's really nice when you're doing a lot of experimenting and stuff. When you're just you want to be right there working with your database, and then you're like, oh, I made a bunch of changes, and I don't remember what they are, or I just want to make sure I got exactly what I have back and forth without copying and pasting. Does it all for you.
What happens if someone is making changes on the database while you or someone else is making changes in the project code, and there are conflicts? Is there some sort of merge or some sort of conflict resolution?
Yeah, I imagine you could. I haven't dealt with that before, but I imagine what you'd do is you'd bring it in. So you do the compare, and then you could see. Let's see. So then you'd have those comparisons that you could look at. And so you could say, okay, what has changed and work through manually. So it's kind of like working with Git, right? Sometimes you might have these conflicts. Um, and so you have to manually work your way through them, right? So you'd have to do the same thing. Okay, and so, okay, so um, not only can you do it in here, but a lot of times you want to work directly on the command line. Um, and so some of this, you can't do all of the work in the command line. You actually need Visual Studio to do most of this work. But for publishing and such, you could actually, there's a command line executable called SQL package that you can work with. Um, let's see, so CMDR. And the SQL package executable, you could actually, let's see, I think I put it in this other project. Okay. Yeah. Um, sorry guys, I didn't do that part of the presentation. So, but just so you know, you can do everything with the command line. Um, so you could do like export, import, you could create your deck pack. You could do comparison. So let's say you export your DAC pack from your project and you hand it to your DBA or to another developer. They could take that with the command line SQL package and do a comparison against whatever database they want to do it with. So perhaps it's with the DBA. They could generate those same scripting files and look through them, make sure it all looks correct, and then go ahead and do it to production. When I was working on this, I was basically a one-man team, so I didn't really have to worry about conflicts between other teammates and such. Um, and then, in larger companies, your DBA might be like, I don't want you touching production directly, but this is really nice for them because it does most of the work for them. And all they're doing is just checking, make sure it works, everything's being done right, that they're not going to lose any data, and then they can say, okay, it looks fine, I'm going to go ahead and deploy to production. And once you start getting a good testing process going, you can you could actually test to make sure if you do it on like a staging database, and you could test all your columns and say, okay, did this destroy any columns or anything like that? And if it did, then it doesn't pass test. And if it didn't, then go ahead and let it work on production. And so you could actually have a true CI/CD workflow there. Um, and in the presentation here, number 19, there's these great, let's see, I put all these videos that I watched and I found that they're really good to get you started. This is the one that I did, uh, that I, whoops, no, go back. Okay, so this, the presentation I gave today, she has some more information and I've presented different information too. But it was largely based on her presentation, because she did a phenomenal job. Um, and then here we have this unit testing one that shows you different frameworks. I used T-SQL-T before. I don't know if you guys have heard that testing. It's everything's in the same language of SQL, T-SQL, and you could test your data, your tables, your routines and such. But it was kind of clunky to work with. And in this presentation, they were showing how you could use XUnit, and there's another, I forget the actual name of the other one they were showing, but it was with a Ruby-based language, and it actually looked pretty slick. So this one shows you how to do CI with SSDT, and it's a real short one. This one shows the DevOps pipeline, and then the SQL package executable. There's the docs for it, and towards the end of Hannah Gray's, she shows you some of the things you could do with the SQL package. And one of the problems that you find sometimes when you're working with all this stuff is, where the heck is this thing? Because it's not, it's not in your path. So that super user question shows you right where it's at. And the Sequila database is at the bottom there if you guys are interested in it. It's just a really simple database, nice for presentations and such, rather than the full-blown one that you usually see on .NET presentations. And any questions? Any more questions? Did you find it enlightening? Yes, if you go to the this presentation on Desert Code Camp website, there's a link that will have this presentation on it. I think I made some changes, and I'll go ahead and I'll update it. Yeah, so you can see, okay.
I had a couple of kind of rudimentary questions because I kind of typically worked in a Unix environment and an Oracle database. So Microsoft set of tools is something I'm not that familiar with. But is SQL Server data tools, is that something that's already baked into Visual Studio, or is it like an additional plugin or something?
Yeah, it's a plugin. Yeah. Extension, yeah.
Oh, okay. And it only works with SQL Server data, it's not with MySQL or anything else.
I don't believe it works with those at all. And you actually need 2012 and above to work with this, because that's when they started introducing all the different tooling in SQL to actually be able to understand what's going on with itself.
Do you mean SQL Server 2012 or Visual Studio?
It was SQL Server 2012 and above.
And does the SQL Server data tools, can you use it with the community edition of Visual Studio or only that?
Yeah, I believe it's free across the board. You don't even need to have Visual Studio installed. You could actually just take, I believe there's an executable that you could download, and it'll install Visual Studio for you, like a more basic version of Visual Studio. So.
I just want to make sure I have the flow right. You made the change in the script, and then it doesn't actually update the database until you publish it. Is that correct?
Yeah, or run the script that you've generated.
Okay. Then you make other changes, publish that, go test, other changes. Then when you're ready to go to your test environment, you then do the compare to the test database and get one complete script, or do you run the individual scripts?
Yeah, you could make it so it does a comparison against your test database, and it creates one script to do everything. And I didn't show in this presentation, but I mean, all along you want to make sure you're using your source control, Git, and making sure you put in all that. And I have a .ignore file in the sample project that I've put up online, which is also, the link to that is also on the Desert Code Camp website. Any other questions? So yeah, I hope you're sold. I mean, it's pretty powerful. You can do amazing things getting your database into source control. I think that's part of why we tend to fear the database so much and have moved more towards ORMs and such, is because we didn't have this tooling, and now that we do, we could kind of make a lot more changes in our database with more confidence, especially if we have a lot of that code in there. Of course, if you are using ORMs and doing scripts like that inside your application code, then you'll have to make sure you're testing that application code along with it anytime you're making changes. So, well, thanks for coming.